Hey everyone, so Magnolia turns 20 this year. This is crazy. This movie being 20 years old, I figured why not review it along with all the other movies that have turned 20, such as The Green Mile, American Beauty, Fight Club, being John Malkovich. Magnolia was only a matter of time before I reviewed it, and it being 20 today, figured I would review it. So, Magnolia is a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Up to this point, he had directed Hard Eight and then Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights was a huge hit, both at the Oscars as well as was a box office, not phenomenon, but it did very well. And so the studio was like, hey, your follow-up movie, do whatever you want. And Paul Thomas Anderson was like, okay, I'm going to do a movie that's even longer than Boogie Nights. That was Magnolia, 3-hour, 9-minute, ambitious mosaic film about multitudes of characters and their stories and how they're interwoven with each other and somehow linked by a single event that happens towards the end of the movie. Magnolia has such a great cast. I'm saying that right now. The cast is incredible. Tom Cruise, Jason Robards, John C. Reilly, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore, William H. Macy. That alone is 6 characters that are actors that do such a great job. The cast and the acting are interwoven in a way that's incredible because the cast is an ensemble one, so it's like some people might be like there's not one performance that is like a standout, but in my opinion, I think all 6 of those performances are standouts. I mean, every time that they're on screen, I was personally really engaged, and I really do also think that the writing for this movie is really good. I mentioned in my Quentin Tarantino ranking video about how I really respect Pulp Fiction with how it paved the way for movies that have a huge cast, that have all these different characters whose lives are interwoven in some which way. Magnolia was one of those movies that I didn't mention, but I probably should have mentioned because that's what I always think about how Pulp Fiction influenced this movie. It really did, especially this movie, because Magnolia feels like it's Quentin Tarantino meets Martin Scorsese, and that's what Paul Thomas Anderson's directing was for this movie. And I think it works. I think the directing of this movie is top-notch. And it's interwoven with fantastic cinematography. I think that the camera work is very ADD-like. And when I say that, I mean in the best of ways, because it's always moving. The camera's constantly moving from one character to another, or even one thing to another. And it makes for a very energetic thrill ride almost. And I know it's like, oh wait, it's a drama. But I really do felt like there was a thrill and like an energetic vibe to this movie that was due to the directing and the cinematography. And I haven't even gotten to the sound and the score and soundtrack. Let me first just say this. The sound design, I feel like, doesn't get talked about enough with this movie. I think the sound design is really good with how it's interwoven the soundtrack, the score, the dialogue of the characters, and the noises of like such things as like rain with the like final act. And that leads me to, with the final act, I love how ambitious that final act is. The soundtrack by Amy Mann during those scenes in the final act are incredible. But John Brandon's score for this movie doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion. Everyone always talks about Amy Mann's soundtrack, but it's John Brandon's score that's really actually emotional. Amy Mann's soundtrack is very entertaining to listen to, especially during the film, but John Brandon's score is what really takes home the emotional cake of being able to bring about emotions that really are powerful, in my opinion. And let's not forget the fact that this movie's tone is pitch perfect. I mean, this movie, for the most part, is very serious. And I think the somber tone really does help with what the movie's trying to accomplish. And the messages of the movie, I think, are very potent. I think that they are messages that I feel like everyone can relate to. That feeling of living an everyday life, either being unfulfilled, having regret, or also just having it where there are people and connections that happen. Whether you know it or not, there are people in your life where it's like, oh wow, I know that person because of that person. Oh wow, if I didn't know that person, I wouldn't know that person. And it's crazy, and I feel like this movie kind of just really does show that with how each character is interwoven in some way or another, whether it's a little thing or a big thing in some cases, and I really like that. I think that this movie, it's not perfect. It isn't. But I can't help but say that I really, really respect the heck out of this movie. But I do think that as much as I respect that a big budget movie such as this was able to get greenlit by a young 30-some-year-old director and given the ability to do a 3-hour and 9-minute movie, which these days, Avengers aside, I feel like the studio would be like, no, cut out an hour. But Paul Thomas Anderson was able to do a 3-hour, 9-minute movie because he had Final Cut. Now, I feel like that's the biggest flaw and also one of the biggest positives of this movie, because whilst I love the fact that he was able to get free reign and everything, I have to emphasize that I do think it's kind of also a bit flawed. It's like a catch-22 almost, because we get to see a director's full, unfiltered, unedited rendition of everything that he was just thinking about, spilling his guts out over the script. But at the same time, we have a second act that is a bit flabby. And that stinks, because there are certain things that happen in the second act. It's not that it's not totally 100% interesting. It's just that there are things that are kind of lacking with what the director's trying to say during some of these moments in the second act. And I don't want to pinpoint certain things, because if you haven't seen the movie, this is a non-spoiler review. But I think it's careful to know that there are certain things that happen in the second act that do feel a bit tedious. And I feel like if the movie was maybe 10 minutes shorter, that wouldn't have been the case. But again, that's almost like hypocritical of me, because I love and respect the fact that this movie is 3 hours and 9 minutes done by a young director in a studio-based film. So that's impressive. So again, I know it sounds almost hypocritical, but it really is a catch-22 kind of issue. But that's honestly one of my only issues with the movie. In terms of aging, I think that this movie has aged really fine. The visual effects still hold up, I think, with the final act, with a certain event that happens. I think it's still very thrilling and ambitious with what it was going for. I really liked that. I think Tom Cruise's character, it's not that he hasn't aged well. I just think that it's going to be very interesting to hear other people's point of view when this does turn 20 today, because I'm recording this review a couple months before that, so I'm curious to hear what those people that are saying, has it aged well? Like, I'm curious to hear their thoughts. I personally think that Mackey's character of Tom Cruise, I don't know if his character, people are going to say it's aged well. I think his character has, because it is really a critique of society and their view on women and how emotional trauma really does affect you and have a ripple effect, much in the same way that all these characters have an emotional ripple effect throughout their life. And that's interesting to me. So that's why I personally am fine with Mackey's character, because he's a cog in a machine that, in my opinion, works really well. Magnolia, again, it's not a perfect movie, but it is ambitious, it is thought-provoking, and it is a heck of an entertaining movie that, if you haven't seen already, I would highly recommend. And that's why Magnolia, for me personally, I will be giving a 4.75 out of 5 star, which is like a hot sauce rating. It's the good old Tabasco rating. So, it's a good movie. And if you've seen my Paul Thomas Anderson ranking video, you probably already knew that, because I ranked it in my top 5 of his movies. So, guys, enough of that, though. What did you think of Magnolia? Did you like it? Do you think it's aged well? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And what is your favorite film from 1999? Mine's American Beauty. Magnolia is probably top 5 of that year. But let me know your favorite movie in 1999 in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll